Thank you, everyone. I'm sorry, I had little dog care things to do. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Felix, and everyone part of Trans Activism UK. And thank you, all of you, for being here. I'm Florence. I'm the founder and director of the Vagina Museum, and I am a proud queer Jewish woman. The Jewish community has been seeing the signs for years now that fascism is rising in a frighteningly familiar way. I bring up this intersection because the history of the queer community and Jews are intertwined. In 1919 in Berlin, gay Jewish doctor Magnus Hirschfeld I am so glad there are fans here. Founded the Institute of Sexual Research. It housed research on queer sexualities. Yes, that's Scruffy. He supports Magnus Hirschfeld too. It has a research on queer sexuality, a museum of sex, a library, an archive of homosexuality, provided sanctuary and employment to trans people, and provided medical services from contraception to psychiatry. It was a centre for queer studies, and it was one of the first places to perform gender-affirming surgeries in the modern world. But just 4 months after the Nazis took power in 1933, the Institute was stormed, sacked, staff beaten, books burnt. Staff were taken to death and concentration camps. Hirschfeld was not in Germany at the time, and he had to spend the rest of his life in exile. A city that was a thriving sanctuary for queer people became hell on earth in a matter of years. And I also just want to point out the irony that today I've written the phone number of a legal firm on my arm, just in case. Do not pass out the irony of a Jewish woman having to write numbers on her arm just to come to a protest here in Britain in 2022. The Tory government likes to act that because they were the party in power when same-sex marriage was legalised, that somehow they must be paragons for LGBT rights. Berlin was once a centre for the queer community, and that didn't stop the fascists taking power. In the press release for the LGBT conference that was supposed to happen today, Dominic Raab was quoted saying that the right to live without fear and persecution is the bedrock of inclusive and open societies. Well, then why does this government deport LGBT asylum seekers at a higher rate to other asylum seekers? Liz Truss said, "I want everyone to be able to live their life free from prejudice, malice or violence, regardless of their background or who they choose to love." Then why have they still not banned conversion therapy? And why are they refusing to include gender conversion therapy in their promised ban that we still have not seen? If the Tory government is such fans of LGBT rights, why do we have Nadine Dorries and the fucking Prime Minister trying to ban trans women from sports? The government likes to say that they support the queer community when their actions show the total opposite. What meaningful things are they doing about the huge rise in transphobic hate crimes? Fuck all! Why are they doing nothing when their MPs and their peers say horrifyingly transphobic and queerphobic things? People sometimes wonder, what would I do in Germany in the 1920s and 30s? You're finding out the answer right now. The rise of transphobia in this country is a shame upon us. I want to talk briefly about how transphobia hurts cis women, not because I want to center our experiences over trans people, but because there are lots and lots of trans and non-binary and gender non-conforming speakers who will do so eloquently today, but rather because I want to put to rest the idea that you can be a feminist and a transphobe. The two are not compatible. Transphobia exists as a way of the patriarchy policing womanhood. The transphobes speak about the need for women-only spaces as a way of protecting women from male violence, conveniently ignoring The blatantly obvious fact that men have never had any issues committing violence against women, even with women-only spaces. And that trans people are at greater risk of violence than cis women. And how would a women's-only space ever work anyway without violence against women? Are we being expected to show our vulvas to cops just so we can enter a bathroom? How is that fucking feminist? Hasn't feminism spent decades trying to get society to stop reducing us down to our body parts? We're at a point where any woman who doesn't look femme enough gets questioned in the bathroom. How can you not see that this is the patriarchy enforcing gender? And we must not forget, these gendered standards come from white supremacist ideals, where gender is policed by what white bodies should look like. The transphobes sometimes like to say that supporting trans rights means that we can't fight for women's rights, because the boundaries of who can be a woman has changed, which is obviously fucking nonsense. Do they think that in a fully gender-inclusive world, I could go to a doctor's surgery and say, I would like an abortion, please, and the doctor has to say, no, I'm sorry, gender doesn't exist anymore, and therefore neither do abortions? And in practice, I haven't seen any gender inclusivity actually creating any systemic problems, but transphobia has. The Vagina Museum once invited a Polish artist to do a takeover of our social media to talk about the restrictive abortion legislation and the protests that were happening in Poland at the time to fight it. She used gender-neutral language, and what was the main problem that she faced when bringing this issue to light? Transphobes on social media derailing the conversation by criticizing her use of gender-neutral language. They were the ones who were stopping someone advocating for abortion access. The backlash against rising support for trans rights in most of society is in fact a backlash against the breaking down of the sex and gender binary. Trans people, non-binary people, and gender non-conforming people challenge this binary. And this binary does not help women. So it is in cis women's interest to also get rid of it. We should be standing arm in arm to dismantle the patriarchy. Sometimes it definitely feels like this is a huge, overwhelming issue. And I do get hopeless sometimes. But we must remember that this is too big a problem for a silver bullet to fix everything overnight. This will take time. We keep fighting, we keep turning up to protests, we practice civil disobedience, we protect our friends, we look after ourselves, we thrive. In the Jewish community, we often say that when we live our best lives, that's how we show the Nazis they lost. Our government needs to do fucking better. They need to get better, or they need to get out. Thank you.